All right, so buckle up for this deep dive. This one goes out to all those true crime fans out there. We're tackling a case that stayed ice cold for over 30 years. It's the mystery of a Jane Doe found in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas.
And this case really shows, like, how far we've come with forensic science, right?
Hmm.
Especially DNA. It's like giving these cold cases a whole second chance.
Yeah, no kidding. Imagine, right? It's 1990. Some guy is out, looking for mushrooms near this place called Crystal Lake, and he stumbles across, well, something way creepier. It's human skeletal remains just scattered around this burned elm tree.
Yeah, and the fact that it was so remote, right? You got to wonder, like, why there? Did they pick that spot on purpose?
Yeah,
Hide what they did?
makes you think for sure. And get this, the investigators found like shotgun shells, lead pellets, even a piece of a woman's undergarment there.
Ugh, sounds rough. The medical examiner said the victim was a woman, probably between 28 and 32 years old, shot point blank, too. The damage on her fingertips, it even looked like she tried to protect herself, at the very end.
Man, that's a chilling thought. So with the crime scene that messed up, where did they even start?
Well, first things first, they had to figure out who she was, right?
Mhm.
But no ID. And the technology back then was pretty basic. It was a huge hurdle.
Yeah, it must have been frustrating for those investigators, like trying to solve a puzzle with like half the pieces missing.
Totally. And on top of that, there were a few potential suspects right off the bat.
Oh yeah. Who were they?
The guy who found the body and his family, they kind of stuck out, right?
Hmm.
One brother, he lived near where they found the remains. And apparently he had a reputation for saying some disturbing stuff. And then there was another brother who, well, he'd taken his own life around the same time they think the murder happened.
So being close to the scene definitely makes them, persons of interest. But
Right.
was there anything solid linking them to it?
That's where it gets tricky. I mean, sure, they were connected to the area, no doubt. But their stories, they actually checked out. And they had alibis for when they thought the crime happened. Without knowing who the victim was, it was a dead end.
So they hit a wall.
Pretty much. The case went cold. And for years, Donna Sue's story, well, it seemed like it might stay buried.
Wait, Donna Sue, is that our Jane Doe?
Yep, that's her. But it took, like, over a decade and a totally new way of investigating to give her back her name.
That's where the forensic genealogy comes in, right? This is what makes this whole thing so interesting.
Exactly. But before we get into that, let's rewind a bit. Try to learn more about Donna Sue's life before all this went down. She was more than just a victim, right?
Absolutely. Let's switch gears and see what we know about Donna Sue Nelton, the woman behind all this mystery.
Well, from what they gathered, talking to her family and friends, Donna Sue was, well, from what they gathered, talking to her family and friends, Donna Sue was a real free spirit. Big heart, loved to travel, really lived life to the fullest.
It's just awful to think about her life ending like that. So do we know anything about what led up to her disappearing?
Yeah, it seems she'd gotten mixed up with a bad crowd. The last time anyone saw her, she was with this guy, George Brutin. Real career criminal. The guy had a record a mile long, bank robberies, kidnapping, even had ties to the mob, it seems.
Man, he sounds like a real piece of work.
No kidding. And Donna Sue's family, they were worried sick, but they held out hope. Maybe she was still alive, maybe even in witness protection, something like that.
So while her family was hoping for the best, the case just sat there for years until 2008 when a new detective, Letty Hunter Petre, he decided to give it another shot.
What struck you about his approach to the case?
Well, he was like a dog with a bone. Went back over all the evidence, looked for any new ways to do DNA testing, and then he took a chance on this new technique, forensic genealogy.
Bold move. It was still pretty cutting edge back then. Basically, it's like you take DNA from the crime scene and you compare it to those online family tree websites, see if there's any matches.
So it's like building a family tree, but in reverse, and it leads to the suspect. Walk me through how it works.
Sure. First, they get a DNA profile, right, from a sample. In this case, it was from Donna Sue's remains. Then, they run that profile through the database, looking for any hits, even if it's just a distant relative.
So it's about shared DNA, even a little bit.
Exactly. And when they get a hit, well, then it's old school detective work. Birth certificates, marriage records, obituaries, all that stuff. They build out family trees, looking for a common ancestor. Then they can narrow down the suspects.
That's wild. So did Petre's gamble, did it pay off?
It did, but it wasn't easy. He sent the DNA sample to this private lab, Aram Inc. They were able to create a new profile they could use on those public genealogy websites.
Man, those websites, they've got to have tons of profiles. What are the odds of finding a match, really?
It's a long shot, but get this, they got hit. The profile matched a woman whose mom had reported her daughter missing ages ago. Seemed like a break in the case, but there was a twist.
A twist. There's always a twist. What happened?
The woman, the one with the DNA match, she didn't recognize the missing person as her sister. Turns out, their mom had run away from home, cut off contact with the whole family, including the missing daughter.
Ah, so back to square one. Petre must have been pulling his hair out.
You'd think so, right? But this guy, he didn't give up. Started combing through obituaries, online records, anything to connect that DNA match to the missing person report from way back when.
Sounds like a ton of work. Find anything.
He did. Buried in this online obituary, he found the name Donna Sue Nelton, and it clicked. He went back to the old files, and there it was, a note, handwritten, from 1995. Donna Sue's mom had called the cops, reported her missing.
Wow. 5 years after they found her remains, her own mother called it in. Talk about a misconnection.
Yeah, a real tragedy how things fell through the cracks.
For sure. But hey, at least Petre was finally on the right track.
Right. He was. He found Donna Sue's brother, did the DNA test, and bam, it was confirmed. The remains were Donna Sue Nelton. Bittersweet, though. After over a decade, she had her name back. But the question remained, who did it?
And with Donna Sue's ID finally sorted, did things start moving on the investigation?
They did. But the answers they found, well, they just added to the tragedy and the complexity of the whole story.
Okay, now you've really got to tell me what happened next.
Well, remember George Brutin, the bad guy Donna Sue was last seen with? He became suspect number one, fast.
Yeah, makes sense, with his history and all.
Right. And Petre, he dug deep into Brutin's past. Found some pretty damning evidence. Turns out, right after Donna Sue vanished, FBI agents saw Brutin dumping her stuff. Even found her car in one of his storage units.
So the FBI, they suspected him back then, right? Why didn't they go after him?
That's the million-dollar question. Maybe they didn't have enough to directly link him to her disappearance, or maybe they were building a case against him for his other crimes, you know.
Ah, man. Frustrating. They might have had all the pieces, but just couldn't put them together in time.
Yeah, and it gets worse. A prison snitch later said that Brutin actually confessed to killing her. Even gave details about where he buried the body.
Hold up, a confession. Why didn't anyone follow up on that?
Seems like a communication breakdown, you know? The info never got to the right people.
Ah, come on. They had a confession, and the case still stayed cold.
It shows how important it is to, talk to each other, work together, especially in these big cases that cross different states, different agencies.
Right. So what about Brutin? Did they ever get him for Donna Sue's murder?
Sadly, no. Remember, he got sent away for life back in '90. Well, it turns out he died in 2008, the same year the DNA tech caught up enough to crack the case wide open.
So he died before facing justice for what he did to her. That's tough to swallow. Justice was robbed twice, it feels like.
Yeah, a real tragedy. But even though Brutin, even though he was gone, Eltina and Petre still wanted to give Donna Sue's family some peace.
So even though they couldn't put Brutin on trial, Petre kept digging. What more could he do, really?
Well, even without the trial, Petre knew Donna Sue's story deserved to be told. He wanted to give her family the answers, the closure they'd waited for all those years.
That's amazing. Shows you the kind of guy Petre is, you know? He wasn't just closing a case. He was making sure Donna Sue wasn't forgotten.
Exactly. He was giving her family a chance to grieve, to heal.
It just shows you these investigations, they're about more than just solving crimes. It's about people, about giving them back their dignity.
You got it. And in Donna Sue's case, it's unique, sure, but it also shows some truths about justice, about never losing hope.
And those are themes we should definitely talk more about. What are some of the big takeaways from this case, things you think our listeners should really think about?
Well, first off, Donna Sue's story shows that even the coldest cases, they can be solved with, some grit, new technology, maybe a little luck too.
Yeah, she's proof that you never give up, right? Always got to look for new angles, even when it seems like there's no hope left.
Exactly. It's a win for her and for every family out there still waiting, still hoping for answers.
And speaking of answers, Petre gave Donna Sue's family something they'd been missing for so long. The truth. He returned her remains so they could finally lay her to rest properly.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
That human side of it. It's not just a case file. It's about helping people heal, remembering those we've lost.
Donna Sue's case, it really shows what forensic science can do, especially DNA. Makes you wonder how many other cold cases are out there just waiting for the science to catch up.
It's a pretty exciting time for forensics, no doubt. Always something new being discovered. Tools, techniques, things that can unlock the past.
Yeah, like a whole new way of doing detective work. But with all this new stuff, got to think about the ethics too, right?
Oh, for sure. Using these online genealogy databases to solve crimes, that's a can of worms, man. Lots of implications.
Yeah, like what are some of the ethical things we got to think about with this technology?
Well, on one hand, it's an amazing tool for cops, right? Could solve tons of cold cases, bring justice for victims and their families. But on the other hand, you got to think about privacy. People put their DNA on those sites for family history, not to be part of a police investigation.
Right, right. So it's like they didn't really consent to their info being used that way.
Exactly. So who gets to see that info? How do we use it responsibly? Big questions we need to be talking about, especially as this tech gets more and more common.
It's a tough one, right? We want to solve crimes, bring the bad guys to justice, but we also got to protect people's privacy, make sure their genetic info isn't being misused.
It's a conversation we got to have as a society. Figure out how to use this powerful tool the right way, ethically.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Donna Sue's case, we're left with more than just answers, I think. It makes you think about the power of science, how dedicated these people are to finding justice. And it makes you think about those ethical questions, As tech keeps changing, what's right, what's wrong?
Well said. Donna Sue's story, it's a reminder that even when things are bad, there's still hope. And as tech keeps moving forward, we got to make sure we're using it for good, for justice, for honoring those we've lost.
And on that note, folks, that's our deep dive for today. We encourage you to keep learning about this case, look into the whole forensic genealogy thing, and remember Donna Sue Nelton. Her life was cut way too short, but her story, it's still teaching us, inspiring us.